Hello and welcome to Run Till You're Done. Tonight we have the owner of Physio Effects in Glasgow, as well as having an incredible running resume of his own. We will be chatting tonight about his running achievements, looking after the running community with their injuries and prevention, as well as being possibly one of the most active dads in the East End of Glasgow. Welcome to the show, Jonny Kilpatrick.
Thanks, guys. What an intro. I'm excited to talk to you here.
So the first question that we ask every guest is, how did you first get into running?
I'm an unlikely runner. If you look at the sports I did growing up, never enjoyed running. When I moved to New Zealand and Australia back in 2008, you used the good weather to best effect and got out at lunchtime and just did a bit of a jog most days. So quite liked it then. But then when I moved back to Scotland, moved away from it and gravitated into CrossFit, where I really enjoyed the weights and that side of things, and ended up ballooning up to like 97 kilos and shifting a fair bit of weight about. But the honest answer where I'm getting to is actually I got into running off the back of a drunken bet with another CrossFitter on New Year's Eve of 2015. So my words, not his. Andy suggested I could never get my muscular glutes around an ultra course. And yeah, a few too many whiskies in the hand went out and he nominated the devil. So 2016, the Devil of the Highlands was my first ultra, and of course out of, I don't know, sheer belligerence and arrogance, I don't think I actually trained for that any more than what I was doing anyway with the CrossFit. So there was a few 5Ks, etc. going in over the course of the week, but yeah, never really knew much about running training or anything, and somehow ground my way around that.
So did you go straight into, like, normally the progression is 5K, half marathon, marathon, and then ultra? Did you go straight into the devil? Was that the first race that you'd done?
It was, yeah.
For listeners, if you don't know, the devil being the Devil of the Highlands, the second half of the West Highland Way.
And for what it's worth, grossly underprepared, but actually really enjoyed it, and it got under my skin for a few reasons.
And how did you get on with that race? What was the weather like that day?
Thinking back, it's fairly unremarkable. I do look at the pictures and think I was quite overdressed for the occasion, you know, multiple buffs and long layers, and you know, I'd never wear that now, but you know, that was all the rage back then, I guess. I did okay, actually. I finished it, which was the main goal, and yeah, Andy that had made the bet with, he was also doing the race, and ironically, as times went by, he's only doing CrossFit and weightlifting, and I'm only doing ultra running, so we've kind of changed lanes. But on the event itself, you know, I can't tell you how happy I was to come up over the top of the Devil's Staircase like a burst couch myself, but to see Andy sat on the grass with cramp, and I was able to ask him if he needed a hand with that.
And most importantly, did you get to the finish before him?
I didn't. He had a good last section, but we came down into Kinloch Leaving together, and you know, this is funny thinking back to it now. And in all my wisdom, being the CrossFitter I was back then, one of the things, I don't know if you've came across it, was voodoo floss. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So it's essentially a rubber band that we'd all use to kind of release sort of myofascial adhesions in the leg, and you'd put it on you really tight like a tourniquet and do a whole pile of squats and lunges and stuff, and it did actually really make it feel like it freed you up a lot, you know, pre-workout. So my game plan was to hit Kinloch Leaving and do a whole pile of voodoo floss, and so got to the back of a car, stuck on this really tight tourniquet on my quads and started doing loads of squats and lunges. 10 minutes later, tried to get onto the last section and realized that now I pretty much couldn't run at all. But yeah, so Andy, yeah, he sort of left me on the last section. But on the last section of that race, and this is where I think it all got under my skin a bit, coming through the Largmore, I remember thinking, right, physio brain, get your form sorted out here, you know, shoulders back, you know, chip away at this, you're on the last section. And then, sorry, Mum, if she listens to this, 3 ladies that looked about the age of my mum came past me and told me I was doing really well.
Oh.
which was nice. But then I thought, right, Jonny, this is your moment. You know, you need to take them over or get past them again. So I tried with everything I had, and they just kept getting further away from me until they were out of sight. And then about another like half an hour later, I rounded a corner and they were sat. I think one of their husbands had came up and delivered them tea at Lundavra. And as I was going past, there was a lot of whooping and you're going to do this and great. So I thought in that moment, right, I'm going back to this and training properly. So that's where it all started.
How soon did you go back?
So I gave it a break in 2017 because our daughter Aria was born, but did actually start a wee bit of running then and just recognised that, you know, 90 odd kilos is far too heavy for this sort of distance, especially you know, if you're not regularly running. So got the weight down and hired a running coach. So Neil McNichol of Run Recover, who's a really good mate now. And Neil got me into shape for 2018, where I did the Fling, the West Highland Way race and the Devil that year. So there was some good improvements.
And since the Devil, you've went through plenty of other races. Recently, it's been the Lakes Traverse. Tell us how you got on in that.
So the Lakes Traverse was just about 10 days ago. It was a sort of curiosity race for me. I'd never heard much about it, and I love the Lake District. We've, as a family, gravitated down to there in the last few years. We're there every other weekend, really, with the camper van. And I just thought it looked a cool route going from the west coast right across it to the east coast. And Shane Oley runs it, and he's got plenty of other events that are popular. So it was, it appealed. Starts in St. Bees, goes to Shap. And I guess my race went well. I got my best ever finish, but I was forced to work hard for that, which was my own fault.
And how did you your training leading up to that? How was that? How do you think being a physio changes the way you train?
So my training was different this time going into Lakes Traverse. So up until the start of this year, I've been consistently trained by Neil, and I decided as I'm coaching myself these days, to coach myself from the start of January. Nothing to do with his training. Like, there's no other coach I recommend more. It was just I wanted to try a slightly different Norwegian style of training that I think would be more applicable to ultra running than the sort of more conventional stuff that we've all been doing. And it was too hard to have somebody else train double threshold days for you when they don't know your schedule. So training was very different this year. It was very intense, but it worked a treat. I've never felt better on a race and had a really strong finish. So
Norwegian style.
I think you were going to ask what I was going to ask as well there, Mike. What is Norwegian style training as opposed to conventional?
Okay, so Norwegian style, everyone will have heard of, the Jakob Ingebrigtsen and the Ingebrigtsens. They didn't develop it, but they're probably the most famous, I guess, like athletes doing it at the minute, as well as a few of the top Ironmen. But the take-home headline is it's actually double threshold days twice a week. But they do their thresholds sessions a little different than most, say, marathon runners. So I looked at like how they were calibrating that. Now they normally use lactate threshold testing, so like blood samples between intervals to keep it like below a level that you can't really come back from, where the horse bolts. That's not practical for me or most people. So like I sort of gauged what paces they were going at for their intervals, which would be more like half marathon, 10K and marathon pace. But what it allowed me to do was accumulate like probably with hindsight triple, maybe quadruple the amount of faster running that I was managing without actually feeling any tireder. And yeah, that compounded up over the 12-week block. So I would do a double threshold day on a Tuesday. And then on a Thursday, I'd do my double threshold session in a 2 hour plus trail session, which might look like, 10 times 1 minute uphill. And then later on in the session, you might be doing like 8 minutes on, 4 minutes off times 4, but all on trail. And your long run at the weekend and your easy runs between.
Nikki was doing me an injustice, so I'll tell her off. I knew exactly what the Norwegian style is, or method. What I was actually going to say was they normally base it on long distance track events, which is 1,500 meters. So that's obviously different than the ultra distance, which you're talking 30 to 100 miles sort of thing. Do you think it applies as much? Well, you just said how you've changed it. Can you think of other things you would change?
Going into the next block for Lakeland 50, which is sort of my big race of the year, I'm going to do much the same training, but I'm going to make my first of the 2 threshold sessions much longer. So rather than doing something along the lines of 6 times 6 minutes with 1 minute between, it's going to be more like 3 times 18 minutes at maybe like marathon pace on a hill with 2 minutes between, and just try to make the duration longer of these intervals, but maybe the intensity slightly less, and just get more tolerance to that.
Yeah. And a lot of people, they say run your slow runs slow. Do you think that with doing double thresholds, you need to run it even slower or take more rest days?
I felt I tolerated running my slow runs at my normal pace better than I normally do. Than if I did a normal conventional threshold session where it'd be like sub 5K pace, I'd often feel a bit burst for days, or just on the edge of a niggle. So it felt like my load management needed to be addressed there. Otherwise, I spun myself into a problem. But with this style and this block, I didn't get any niggles at all, and I got a much higher volume and intensity of training over the 12 weeks.
So when you set out at the start of this block, was the main goal to win or to podium?
No, I'd never have that goal. I still don't really consider myself a competitive runner, and don't think I ever will. I don't know why, but yeah, it's more of a hobby that I just love the structure and the discipline of. So yeah, I just get out there and try and sort of do the block, all the sacrifices I've made with the training. I need to do that justice, because it comes at the consequence of dragging the family around and things like that. So
yeah. So during the event, when you're going from checkpoint to checkpoint, were you aware at where you were in the field, and if you were higher up in the fields early on, and I'm hoping you'll talk us through the race, did that change your psychology as to push yourself?
No, I wouldn't say so. The only time I sort of knew where I was in the field was I ran through Honister, which I think's about 28 miles or so in, and Neil McNichol, him and Matt were at Honister. So Neil said I was like 10 minutes behind the leaders at that point, which I knew then must be rightly up the field. So, but yeah, not so long after that was where it all actually went wrong for me on the race briefly. So I charged down the hill from Honister and was quite organised for the next checkpoint or so of thought. Had my powder in my water and or powder in my bottles, my next section's food in my belt, and was following a GPX unbeknown to me that was last year's GPX. So I guess I've missed something in the previous emails and so on. Turns out I did actually download the right GPX, but I had 2 of them in my watch that were both labelled the same thing and had no idea the course had changed. So I was charging down into like a wee sort of village, knowing the checkpoint would be there, and on the GPX I could see a wee tail that came off it, which turns out was to the school in that village. But as I got down to the school, it was shut up. Then went on to like where the buildings were, and there was no checkpoint there either. So just continued following my GPX and realised I was on the next section over to Grassmere. And I thought, I don't really need water here. I'll get it on the course. But it just occurred to me I'll get disqualified if I don't hit the checkpoint. So I had to backtrack. And long story short, I listened to a few locals who had some suggestions that, yeah, they if there's any race or any checkpoint, it'll have to be over here. So half a mile over that way, no checkpoint, back to my GPX line. I looked at my Strava. I added about 4 miles and 40 minutes on looking for it, because it turns out the checkpoint was in a different village. And I'd asked, it turns out Kim Collison and one of his friends were running past. So I recognised who Kim was and thought he might know. So he's pointed me kindly back in the right direction, and I bumped into the first lady at that point, so just kind of latched on to her until I could get to that checkpoint, and they told me I was on the wrong GPX. And it did turn out there was no phone signal in the Langdale Valley either. I did have a look there, so race control was trying to give me a call as well. But yeah, live and learn.
How did that affect you psychologically, thinking there is no checkpoint, I'm losing 40 minutes?
Yeah, in the moment it was more just, yeah, you felt that sort of stress of getting back on course and like you're losing places, position, time. But ultimately, once I got to the checkpoint, it just felt like, well, I've done a lot of these things. I've went longer than this. There's 30 miles left. I'm really well prepared for this race. I actually feel good. And they told me, I think at that point, I was maybe 10th. And I thought, well, I'll get back into the top 5. I'm pretty confident of that. And I'm heat adapted and it's a really hot day. So, yeah, just go through the process of what you would have done anyway and just, yeah, make it count now, own it.
What an absolute comeback.
And you said that you had powders and food in your belt. What were you eating during the race?
So I had a plan. I was going to be between about 95 grams of carbs an hour, and that was a mix of a few different sources. So the powder I was using was Voom. I've got I mix half their natural flavor, like 30 grams of that and 30 grams of their apple and blackcurrant, because I don't like each flavor enough to do 60 grams in a 500 ml bottle, and add a wee bit of extra sodium to that. So that gives me a good 60 grams of carbs in the bottles. And then it's just a mixture of gels. So, you know, I'm quite partial to the Torque energy gels, and I like to sort of alternate between, they've got rhubarb and custard, which is quite tart, and then the next Torque gel I'll have will be like a strawberry yogurt, which is really sweet. So I just like the contrast of that. And then just one of the secret weapons I always have for training, but it doesn't seem to work out for me on the race because it's got a wee bit of chocolate in it, is Turkish Delights. Just they're cheap and cheerful, 38 grams of carbs, and through a winter training block you're hoofing them into you. But yeah, you don't seem to feel like them the same way on a race because of the wee bit of chocolate. But yeah, that went really well actually. Like I felt no stomach issues at all. I was probably more like, yeah, closer to 100 grams of carbs by the time I went down to that checkpoint. And then the problem was I didn't eat or drink a single thing for about an hour until I got myself sorted. So then when I was coming up out of Grassmere, I threw a 50 gram carb gel into me on the climb, which is what I'd planned to do. But it was quite a thick gel and it would have needed a lot of water. And then from that point on, I just had 5 hours of gut bombs the whole way over, where just stomach was nearly doubling you over. But every time that settled after about 20 minutes, I had to get more carbs into me and it just started over again. So it was just a real battle of attrition to the end. But
And then when you came to the end of the race and you'd realised that was you'd come third, how did that feel? When did you realise you were third?
I suspected I only knew I was third about 500 meters from the end. Some guy shouted it at me. But I did pass a young guy who he was flying in the race, the guy Lewis Bowness, I think his name was, early 20s, and I think just unfortunately for Lewis, his race was a wee bit too long for him. He'd had gut issues, and just I passed him about maybe 5k from the end where he was walking in the woods. So just checked he was all right, and to be honest, yeah, it's a shame for him, and I didn't take a lot of joy out of passing someone in that condition. But he ended up finishing fifth, and yeah, I see he's on the start line of the Lakeland 50, so I'm sure he'll he'll
Good competition.
Yeah, he'll show me how fast he is, because I think he's got a big future.
And is that you say that the race that you've just done, is that your favourite race, or was it your first race? What would you say?
The Lakes Traverse. My favourite race, Mike, is, like, without a doubt, it's either of the Lakeland, so the 50 or the 100. I've done each event twice, but just the event, it's hard to describe if you haven't done it. It's like a festival. It's just, I think you've nearly 3,000 people on the course, and they're all camping at the school in Coniston, and it's just brilliant. The route's great. It's the 100's a different beast altogether from the 50. It's very challenging, but yeah, I just love it. And my daughter Aria, she's now got friends that she sees every year at Lakeland, and she's done the Lakeland 1 5 times. Mariam's done the 100. That's my wife, done the 100 once and the 50 once. So yeah, it's brilliant.
I've done both the 50 and the 100, and I've volunteered twice. So I technically haven't paid for a place, because if you volunteer, you get a free place the next year.
Oh, that's my plan from here out, Mike. Emulate Neil, my mate and old running coach, where he seems to have went a good few years without paying for a place because he keeps podiuming or winning the age categories.
Proper Scotsman.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the family there, Jonny. You're all very, very active. How do you manage to keep each other's plans in check and arrange childcare around the family life?
That seems to flow okay for us. I'm sort of co-owner in the business that we both work in, and there's a lot of flexibility then with how we, organize our diaries that way. And then because Mariam's into it, and like we're both passionate about it and love the outdoors, we just make it work for each other. Try usually not to have races at the same time, but now Aria is a bit older, it doesn't matter as much. Mariam doesn't work a Friday, so she can get her long run in then.
And you said you're a physio. How do you find that? Does that help with injuries? And you're saying your wife. Do you help each other with injuries?
We can do, yeah. I guess prevention's better than cure. So I think we're both quite good at just navigating that as we go along. And my specialism within the profession's actually sports physiotherapy, and then a clinical interest in running. So if I can't get it right, I think there's something wrong with me advising other people on it. So it's making the right decisions at the right time, and just looking at load management, and that's progressive overload in terms of peaking for an event, but also like decreasing the load and having the restraint when needed. We're all addicted to running, and just personally, I think the mental toughness that's required for these ultras is actually in the training, and having that restraint and not going out for a hard session when you've had a niggle a few days in a row. It's just that stitch in time saves 9.
And one thing that I saw on your website was something that I've never had before, so I'm going to ask about it, is dry needling. Is that as horrific as it sounds?
Yeah, it's trigger point acupuncture. So it's probably a Western take on Eastern acupuncture, but yeah, trigger points in the muscle. So you're eliciting a local twitch response with the acupuncture needle. It's really effective just when there's a bit of overload in the muscles and they're just, a bit tight and achy. I find it definitely works better than just massage alone.
I've had acupuncture twice, many, many years ago, but I found that it was a great painkiller. Pain went instantly. But as soon as I started doing the thing that was causing the injury in the first place, it came back.
That
But
might have been because it was it treated the symptoms, which is
yeah,
what it's definitely useful for that. But let's take a runner, for example. It's always more useful to address the root problem. So, like, I'm very big on, like, part of the business I run is the Glasgow Running Clinic, and we do running technique analysis. Take that into account with people's injury history, look at their running style. I firmly believe, like, if they keep getting similar injuries, and they're planning and sort of like the plan they're following for an event's reasonably sensible and they're reasonably fit, there's maybe something in their technique that's overloading certain structures. So we try to fix that and get them kind of like patterning that and working on it in their training to fix the problem.
And if someone were about to start a new training block, is the running clinic something you would advise attending before getting stuck into that?
Yeah, I'm biased. I definitely would, but I think there's loads of other sports out there that, like, you go and get coaching before doing, and running, you're accumulating tens of thousands of steps on every single run with multiple times your body weight impact. Now, if that's applied in the wrong sort of lines of force, structure's getting overloaded, and it's not a one size fits all either. So it's just, yeah, it's a very bespoke thing. So I would suggest it's good for everyone, to be honest. And you can go away from the session, your worst case scenario is I tell you you're running great. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Otherwise, you're getting something to work on that's going to better your running in terms of injury prevalence and I guess, like, efficiency and performance in the long run, because you'll accumulate more volume.
That's definitely good to know. In the clinic, aside from the running clinic and the physiotherapy, do you offer any other services?
We do, yeah. So Danny, my business partner, and we're both, like, specialists in sports physiotherapy. We've done sort of university master's level stuff there. And then the two girls that work for us as physios, they're both specialists in women's health. So that's it's a very niche kind of service that we offer that you don't see too many places, and yeah, there's a big need for it.
and going back to Lakes Traverse again, possibly.
Sure.
What is your biggest running achievement?
Um, the Lakes Traverse I probably wouldn't say is my biggest. It's my best finish, but I just feel in a lot better shape than I was a few years ago, and, like, experience rode me through that, and I had the confidence to fall back on a really good training block. And as I said, there was a few extra 1% there. Like, I did like 9 days of heat adaptation before the event, and by luck it also turned out to be hot, so I knew I'd finish well on the back end of it. My biggest achievement's probably either the West Highland Way race in 2018 or the Lakeland 100 in 2019. Both I ended up with just, like, major issues on, which were below the knee. At West Highland Way, I pulled my calf on the lock side, which just tightened it up. I could sort of limp run through it, but yeah, that was a long way out to finish from. But Lakeland 100 2019 was a really wet year, and I would say it's a significantly harder race, as you'll know, Mike. And yeah, I rolled an ankle coming off actually the first bit of flat trail I got onto after the mountain pass over from Blackseal Hut to Buttermere. And then that was a bit limp running for about 10 miles, followed by me then snapping a running pole, which meant I was down to no poles. And then at about 40 miles into that, I'd never heard of trench foot in my life. The trench foot kicked in, and I wondered why I had a blister on both feet. I've never had that before. And that eventually developed into, like, the whole foot feeling like a blister, where for maybe the next 16 hours, every single step on both feet felt like the skin was fully parted. So yeah, that was a real battle of attrition to finish that one out. So I was proud of that finish.
And
That sounds
during West
amazing.
Highland Way, during the West Highland Way, do you remember what colour of Jelly Baby you got on Jelly Baby Hill?
I can't say I do. I don't even know if I did have one.
I was the person handing them out, so that's why I'm asking.
Good stuff. Yeah.
So we actually have a listener question for you as well, Jonny, that followed you on the Lakes Traverse, and they are actually interested to know, off of the back of coming third from that, would you consider doing a road marathon or a flatter ultra?
I would. One of my goal races in the next few years, if I can move out with like races in the UK, would actually be the Comrades in South Africa, which is 100k on road. I'd love to do that. I'd love to go to a city marathon as well and just like, put in a good performance. But at the minute, I'm just too interested in getting into the outdoors and spent my weekends on trails and mountain walking with the girls and so on. So I can't see it in the next year or two.
Comrades is obviously going to need heat adaptation, which you said you have done before. What do you do for that?
So when I start my taper, I've done this on the last 3 races, which like each race has felt like I had a better result through training consistency, but I do think it's helped in all of them actually. So Lakeland 100, Lakeland 50, and now Lakes Traverse. So when I go on the taper about 2 weeks out, I'll do 9 days in a row of basically one way or the other profuse sweating for over an hour. So the three things I'll use tend to be, might go to a gym and that's got a sauna and do maybe 30 minutes of fast uphill walking, just get a good sweat on, straight down to 30 minutes in the sauna, keeping the heart rate high. I may use the spin bike in the house where I'm dressed for like, a winter 6,000 meter peak and do like 30 minutes easy on that, just like getting a good sweat on into a really hot bath for 30 minutes. Or just get out and do maybe an hour's running, but with like hat, gloves, 4 layers in the top, 2 of which are non-breathable, such as like, cheap waterproofs, and then winter tracksuit bottoms, and just, grind that out.
Good on you, because that is not for me.
Do you know the beauty of it, Nikki, is I've had on all 3 races I've done it a moment where I've thought, none of this is even close to any one of those sessions I did on my taper. Yeah. Because they're all absolutely awful. It feels like the equivalent pain of doing like a 5k for a PB effort every single day for the first 9 days of your taper. So you can't, I could be bad for left to my own devices on a taper with decreased volume. I'd be needling quads one night, needling the glutes the next, foam rolling. You're looking for problems, so you don't have time to think about that, and then you find yourself at the race.
Do you think that the heat adaptation is actually like your taper? You're supposed to be recovering so that you can put in a hard effort in the race. Do you think the heat adaptation? Would you possibly do too much of it, or is it more beneficial that you've done it rather than how much it takes out of you?
I think you need to do it well. Like I've read around the topic a lot, so I am hydrating furiously between sessions, all with electrolytes and so on. But yeah, you could make it quite detrimental. Like on one of my blocks, I think I gave myself heat stroke twice in the 9 days, but mild heat stroke, and that was just a bit much. But it felt fairly non-consequential in the end because I had good races and bounced back from it, because I leave a clear 3 to 4 days before the race, with none of it going on. But the physiological benefits of it, even if the race wasn't hot, are massive. You get an increase in plasma volume. I think 6 to 7 days is enough to increase it by about 20%, which is huge, because that's going to be an increased stroke volume on every heartbeat. It's going to cool you quicker at the periphery. Your sweat rate increases markedly, and you'll notice that about halfway through it, you are absolutely dripping sweat. It's just ridiculous, but it's a really watery sweat. And within that, the electrolyte concentration decreases massively as well. So you're actually sweating more and losing less electrolytes per volume of sweat. So, one of the biggest reasons an athlete will underperform is that they actually overheat, and that'll dictate skyrocketing heart rate and so on and so forth.
Part of the sort of sauna theory that the Swedish and Russians do is you have your sauna, but then you have a jungle shower or an ice bath afterwards. Do you do that?
I don't. It's we don't have the facility there where I do it, but also I'm a wee bit apprehensive with the hot cold contrast. Just I'm not sure it's true, but I've read somewhere about like athletes being a wee bit more prone to atrial fibrillation with it. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't really want to do it either. So.
So since your first Ultra of the Devil on a bet with a friend, you've clearly came so far in the last 9 years. Why do you run still?
I just love being outdoors, and it's a good structure of getting that, and the type of races that I'm doing just it takes us in the camper van as a family down to the lakes or up into Scotland, and it's pretty much just that. It's the structure and the discipline of it. I thrive, I think, when I do have that, and I'm quite ambitious with stuff. I like to have a plan from a long way out, and I don't know. I heard some guy did 100 Ironman in 100 days, and he used a phrase that I really liked. It was like macro patience, micro speed. We're just You've got a big overarching goal that you can't achieve now, but like every single session is a small building block towards that. So you have to do that to the best of your ability. But that might also involve sometimes just making sensible decisions and exercising that mental toughness I talked about within the training, and showing some restraint and not giving into that addiction of running, or, the Strava performances or anything like that,
And coming from your bet in the pub, now that the bet's out of the way with, and you're obviously enjoying running, why do you run?
Yeah, I do like the sort of flow state that you get with running. I just find that, it's a bit of time. My job, and I do like talking, but it is talking all day long, and quite often talking to other people about, you're trying to solve their problems. There's a lot of pressure and time pressures associated with it, keeping the schedule going. And it's just guaranteed time for me out in my own head. And I just like that flow state you get with it. And I like that it's building towards something.
And does that answer our next question? Is what do you think about when you're running? Nothing.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. I think like most runners, if you ever voiced it out loud what you think about, you'd be quite embarrassed about it. You've got all these great plans that are hatched on a run on flow state, but in reality, you're not going to write a book about being a dad after it. It was a good idea at the time, It's just...
I don't know. I had the idea to start this podcast when I was out running, and every time I went out for about 2-3 weeks, I'd come back and tell my wife, I'm going to do this, and here we are now. So it's these silly things that you think about when you're out running.
Yeah, no, it is great for that. And okay, if you do have something that's in your mind, sometimes the answer appears, doesn't it?
You've mentioned that you would like to possibly do comrades in the future. Is there any dream races or bucket list races in the nearer future that you would like to do before then?
I don't know where I sit on the sort of European races, because I love, there's loads of them that immediately appeal to me. The Lavaredo for one, because we had a brilliant family holiday in the camper van into the Dolomites. It's just stunning. So running around that would be great. But the flip side of that would be, there is a bit of altitude to consider that's hard to account for in the training over here. So calibrate expectations. And then it's hijacking a family holiday, and I'm more passionate about my holidays and travel than I am about my own running and individual achievements, and I love doing these things with the girls. So heading over there and either having a race hanging over me for the whole week or a few weeks that you're there, I don't know if I'd fully enjoy that or commit to the holiday, or if I did it at the start of it, you just might not show the enthusiasm that you should after it. So But yeah, the Lavaredo really appeals in terms of European races.
Have you ever thought about going and doing your own adventure, like going on holiday and saying, I'm just going to run from this side of the island to that side of the island?
100%. Like, so like UTMB, for example, like I would rather run that with a few mates over like 3 to 4 days at like, it's not going to be easy either. You'll still be doing, I don't know, 30 miles a day in the hills, but it'd be a lot more casual and you can enjoy the huts and, the whole experience. And in my experience, like as much as I've enjoyed the events I've done, I've actually enjoyed more a few personal projects that I've done over the years where I did a Bob Graham round in 2023, let me get that right, just to tune the legs up so that they won't fall apart in the Lakeland 100. But I absolutely loved getting into the whole Bob Graham round and the history of it and just getting down to the lakes and all through winter, getting on it. And then on the day, best thing ever, just going out and like having your mates coming and supporting you. And later on the same year, Neil McNichol, he did one himself, and I enjoyed that just as much as my own or any event. So, similar with the West Highland Way when I did it in winter, it was just nice having friends turn up and have a much more casual sort of day out with pals on a trail, and no one cares. Like I heard Gavin Deal say it on your podcast, and I couldn't agree more. It's like no one will care what time you get on something like a Bob Graham once it's done. So it's just about enjoying the experience.
So did you do that, Bob? Sorry, Mike.
No, on you go.
So did you do that, Bob Graham, just for fun with your friends? You didn't set out to do a time with that?
I obviously wanted to get it under the 24 hours, which I did, but I felt that was always going to be comfortable. What I didn't want to do was like make it a bit of a season ender because my main goal was the Lakeland 100. So yeah. I went out on like a 22-hour schedule. I think I got 21 and a half, but it felt very casual. I don't want that to sound wrong, but it was lovely to do something where I didn't feel like I was just like in a state of despair in the trenches, like having to grind out these hills. So and just chatting away to each of my support runners on the legs and getting to know them a bit more, and then just getting passed over to somebody else, and seeing that everybody felt like they contributed to it.
And you obviously love running with friends, supporting people, them supporting you. Is there anybody that you would love to run with, either fictional, non-fictional, alive, not? Who would it be?
Who it would be? It would be my Uncle Raymond that I grew up with. He's my mum's brother. My whole childhood, like I lived with him, and he was disabled, and so running with him's not really viable. I don't think he would have enjoyed me running him around in a wheelchair either. But having watched him my whole childhood and just seeing the resilience of someone that didn't have all the abilities that we do, and they can go and it takes them 45 minutes to get to and from a toilet, but they still do it, and they still do it with a smile on their face, and it just has such a profound effect on your outlook in life. We go to these events and choose to do them, and you should enjoy them, and you're going to get thrown up some challenges. It's not the end of the world. Just get about it. It was brilliant, and it's 10 years since he passed away, so it would probably be him. And there's a wee bit of a legacy within the family of him, where I've left some of his remains on the top of the buccal. And with my daughter, you might be able to see in the background, that's Aria at 7 years old going up Curved Ridge. So I'm not going to harp under about someone she never met, but that was her first ever mountain, and she was up it when she was 4 months old. And she's been up at the conventional route by herself when she's 5. She's done Broad Buttress up it, which is a grade 2 scramble, when she's 6. She's done Curved Ridge when she's 7. And we'll keep moving on from there, and it's a special mountain for her too.
Well, she's done more than me. I tried to go up Curve Ridge once, and the fog came in, and we couldn't see a thing, so we had to turn back.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the fog's your friend with these things, at least if you're on the right bit of the route.
That was the problem. We were in the wrong place anyway, so it didn't matter.
Yeah. But no, it would be him, and just to sort of show him some of the places that he could never have went, because it's inspired me to do the travel and the adventuring.
That's such a great answer. Thank you for sharing that.
I hope it wasn't too deep.
No, it's exactly what we're after.
Not at all. So I think we're almost coming to the end, unless Mike has any more questions.
I've got one more question, and that was your bet in the pub right back at the start was fueled by whiskey. Is that still part of your training plan?
It's not. No, I had a stage where my wife, who's much more active in social media than me, stuck up a whiskey cabinet that I didn't really have at the time. I had one bottle, and then almost everyone that owed me anything ended up buying me a bottle. So that New Year's Eve was actually our housewarming, and I tried to get rid of all the bottles in one go and threw a whiskey party, and look where that landed us.
So you mentioned the Lakeland 50 as your next event. Anything else coming up post Lakeland 50, whether it be running, climbing adventures? What's lined up for the Kilpatricks for the rest of the year?
So in August, we'll head out to Italy with the van, and we'll try to get Aria up our first 4,000 metre peak on Gran Paradiso. So that's the first immediate plan after it. But then the whole of late summer and autumn will be kind of scrambling and climbing as a family and just dial the running back. Like midweek will be get the speed up again and just, keep that ticking over at weekends or set aside for that. No events the tail end of the year. But yeah, next year I'd maybe like to take a step back from races, but I'm sure you'll see me on the start line of one, and look at more of a personal project again. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe the Scottish 4000s route. I'll look at that, but don't know. Open to suggestions if anyone wants to send them in.
I've just thought of one more question before we sign off. Without naming any names, what's the worst injury you've seen in the clinic?
I've seen a lot of bad ones, to be honest. So sometimes the ones you can, like, I've seen a few guys really smashed up with motorbikes and so on, but yeah, sometimes the ones that you can really relate to, you could just visualize it, are bad. And I remember a few years ago, some guy telling me he's in one of these shower baths, and he just slipped, and the first part of him that hit anything was the middle of his back on the taps, and he did fracture a few of the transverse processes in the back. But do you know, when you could just imagine that happening, it just sent shivers straight up the spine.
Right, on that note, we're going to leave it there, and I'm going to say thank you, Nikki, for being Nikki. Thank you, Jonny, for sharing with us. Thank you for being here. And it's goodbye from me.
Thanks, Jonny.
Thanks very much, guys.